Welcome back. You're watching Citizen Weekend. Now, over the last few weeks, errors that appeared in textbooks have generated a lot of reaction on social media. Many wondered how such content was even approved by relevant bodies tasked with the quality assurance of the textbooks. Now, in response to the uproar, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development says it is doing an analysis of books it approved, adding that some of the books being circulated on social media are not KICD approved. Meanwhile, the Kenya Publishers Association distanced itself from the books bearing the glaring errors, saying they were printed in other countries. KPA also said the matter was being blown out of proportion. Now, whether this was an honest mistake or poor oversight, or even a situation of #KOT or Kenyans on Twitter taking things too far, a critical conversation on the state of our education system has surfaced once more. A new curriculum is set to be implemented next year, and questions abound on just what our children are being taught in the classroom. Joining me in studio now is Jacqueline Onyango, the Senior Deputy Director at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Welcome. And Emmanuel Manyasa, an educationist. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me begin with you, Jacqueline, because there's a lot of chatter on social media, people wondering, for instance, the picture of the functions of different parts of the body, and you see a head and it says the head is used to carry a load. And people are wondering, how did such content even get into the books?
Thank you very much, Victoria. I think one thing I must say from the beginning is that we are all striving to ensure that we provide quality education to our children, and definitely anything that is going to jeopardize that would be of great concern to us. And yes, we have seen on social media there's been a lot of information going around about books that we have approved. We have actually checked, because one of the things that we have within the mechanisms of approval of books is that if for any reason there is a book that has a mistake, or a book that probably is circulating in schools and we are not aware about it, we actually encourage the teachers and any users in the schools to let us know, because there is a policy that guides the kind of books that should be used in schools. From what has happened on social media, yes, we took note of that and we are very concerned. And you know, some of the books that are being said to have been approved by us are not approved by us. They're actually books from different countries. And really, as KICD, we don't have control of what happens on social media. And that is why we always go back and say that whatever you are saying is approved by KICD can only be confirmed as approved if it is in a book we refer to as the Orange Book. Basically, the Orange Book is the list of approved books for all the levels, from pre-primary until teacher education. And with every year that we evaluate the books, we ensure that we update that book. So before we even are able to say that, yes, this is a book that is not, is a book that is supposed to be in school, our first guidance is that as you put that picture, you need to know what is the title of the book, who is the publisher, because with that information you can get it in the Orange Book. And just as I've said, a lot of the books that we have seen, or the pieces of information that are going around, when we checked, we found they are not, approved by us. I know there was a book on social studies, for example, about Kiambu County. It is not in the Orange Book. We also do not have control of what is sold in the bookshops, because our mandate is to approve the books that are being used in schools, provide a list of those books. The ministry will always release that book when it has been printed, and the schools are encouraged that before you buy a book, you must know that it is in the Orange Book. So if a school buys a book outside that, then it's difficult for us to be able to control that.
So could some of those errors slip through the cracks, for instance, from KICD? And just to be clear, some of the content that was circulating on social media, if my director Ivy can bring up some of those pictures once again, for instance, the one with the head and the function of parts of the body, was that cleared by KICD?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
Yes.
The one that was also promoting MPs as role models and had a story of an MP coming with a helicopter, wife with gold rings, waving at the children, was that cleared by KICD?
Yes, that is an approved book.
Okay.
But again, allow me to say that books are developed within a certain context. Because the publisher will be given the curriculum design. Now, the design will provide the kind of information the child should learn in terms of the activities. The publisher will then interpret, for this child to be able to go through certain activities, what kind of activities would I pick? Looking at the book that had the helicopter, the topic that was being discussed was going places. And so going places, there was vocabulary that the children are learning, but there is also the means of transportation. And a page, 2 pages before that particular page, the children are being asked what modes of transport they use, or people around them use to go to hospital, to go to church, how do you get to school? And then after that comes in like a passage.
Right.
So that was like a passage that is enforcing the vocabulary that the children were supposed to get.
I mean, and that seems more of like a technical answer, because people would say there's a bigger message behind that passage.
True.
Could some other content be used to convey that?
Yes, some other content may be used, but you see, that was the choice of the publisher. And in that context, our evaluators will try to understand, because there's a criteria that we use, and look at what is being given vis-a-vis what is being expected of the child to learn.
Okay.
Now, while that book may be in school, we may make different interpretations of it. And as I said, we will take note. If a question is being raised that if you have this helicopter coming and you're talking about a leader, and this leader owns the helicopter, it's giving a wrong connotation, then we have to look back at it. And that is why we said, let the publisher take the book and look at it again. Why are we saying that? The role of curriculum is actually to reflect what the society would like. And not all of us may interpret things in the same way. But of course, if there's a national outcry, then we have to look at it and ask, what are the implications, and is this going to hurt the child? And that's what we are doing. So that we ensure that what we do pass, and even the interpretation then it gets, is what the society wants.
Emmanuel, let me bring you in. When you saw a lot of the conversation surrounding a lot of this content, from where you sit, is it a cause for concern?
Yes and no. Yes, because we tend to think that we are trying to structure a curriculum around certain values, and some of those values will not be reflected in that example of a helicopter and an MP. And so that, because that particular one is approved, that gives us concern, because we wouldn't want that to be approved. It goes against the values we are trying to build a curriculum around. So that concerns us. For those that are not approved, we are not concerned quite, because we think it's just a challenge to KICD to do much more in terms of communicating with parents, because the Orange Book is in every school, but parents are not aware about that. So parents go to bookshops and they buy books, and sometimes these books that they are buying, the logic that they are using to buy the books is not in line with the logic used by KICD in approving books. And so, excuse me, we think that that is where there is a gap between what policy says and what parents who are key stakeholders understand. And so that needs to be worked on, and we think we can throw the ball back to KICD and other partners to inform parents, so that parents know what to buy and what not to buy. But still throw the ball to you about approving things which may go against our values that we want to structure the curriculum around.
And I'm curious, even if you have something like the Orange Book that would guide parents, how do books that have the wrong thing get into bookstores in the first place? Who now is responsible for monitoring that kind of release of information?
Victoria, honestly, I wouldn't say I know who is responsible, because information like books and whatever bookshops sell do not come from one entity. We just happen to be a team that is evaluating books that booksellers may want to stock for purposes of ensuring that they reach the school. So I wouldn't really be able to say who is supposed to know what is being stocked in the booksellers' areas. But I think I agree with Emmanuel when he says that there needs to be a lot more sensitization of even parents, because they also want their children to do well. They'll go out of their way to buy extra books. They may not know what is in the Orange Book. And I think that's what then the new curriculum has done. Because one of the key areas that we have is parental engagement and empowerment. Because what we want the parent to do is to actually know what's happening in school beyond just signing the, the homework book that the child, or diary that the child has done homework. We want them to participate in what the children are doing. And I think in that realm then we'll be able to get the parents to understand where they can get books, what kind of books they need to get, so that we will actually shield our children from getting into reading books that have not been approved.
Let's shift away from the issue of the textbooks now and zoom out, if you will, to the bigger issue of the state of education and learning. What would you say, of course we're coming into new curriculum, as Jacqueline has mentioned, but what are some of the biggest gaps, or what was ailing the sector in terms of challenges?
I think that the education sector has been ailing for a long time, and painkillers may not get us out of the pain. We have a problem with the way we have structured our education. I think initially, when formal education was introduced here, it was for purposes of creating workers for the establishment at that time. And that has stuck in our psyche, that you get education to become a worker. And we have limited education to skills development. And I recently had important people in government saying universities should produce people who have skills for the labor market. That is the wrong thing for a university to do. A university is just supposed to broaden your thinking, and whatever skills that are needed for the labor market should be produced in a middle-level college, not in a university. So we have the wrong concept of what education should be, I think. For me, and education was always there before formal education, education is supposed to enable you to achieve three things. One, enable you to survive. Two, enable you to thrive. And three, enable you to coexist. That's why when a child is born, the first thing they are taught is the harmful things within the environment. This will hurt you, this will not, this you can eat, this you can't eat. Education begins there. Yeah. As societies have grown complex, so education systems have become complex too. The challenge that we face today is that we have not grown in our sophistication to match the challenges of a modern society that we live in. And for me, that is still a gap, a very big gap. We are still mixing education and training. Training is separate from education, and we haven't philosophically separated those, and that is a problem that ails our education system.
And we'll talk about and touch on the whole issue of whether Kenya has a educational philosophy, very important. But really quickly, Jacqueline, if you can just take us through what the new curriculum is all about. We hear the number 26333, and you know, it sounds so complex compared to 844. Okay. You mentioned one function, which was empowering parents, so they're a bit more in tune with what their children are learning in the classroom. But what other things is it meant to achieve?
I think largely, as Emmanuel has said, we look at education as a weapon that allows us to continue living. And why do I say that? Because whether it's formal or informal education or non-formal education, the bottom line is that you are in a certain context. You need to continue perpetuating your life in that context. You need to contribute to that context so that that context can grow. And that is what education does, by and large. The new curriculum is seeking to do what every other curriculum would seek to do. But I think what we need to think about is what is the context we have now that is causing us to think that we would like to improve on that which we have. The context within which we are working is that our children have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have what we are referring to as competences. To have competences, you need three items. You need the knowledge, you need the skills, and you need the values. And those are very critical because the knowledge is what helps you to act. The skills is what helps you to activate that which you think you need to do. The values help you to coexist and live within a frame that is accepted in society. And so we want to emphasize on that. When we did our needs assessment in 2009, the resounding question that the populace were asking us, why am I taking my child to school when they come back, they can't do simple things? And all of us have that outcry. So what we are simply looking at is a situation where we have hinged so much on knowledge, which is important, yes, but it must be translated into action. And we want to ensure that that happens. So what is it we have done? It's beyond the number of years that we are talking about. The 2633 is basically just helping us to see the progression of children. 2 years in pre-primary, 6 years in primary, 3 years in what we are referring to as lower secondary, and 3 years in senior secondary. But if you look at that period of time, it's a period of 12 years, which is the same as what the children are going through now. We are simply looking at what should a child do at different places progressively so that they feel like what they are doing is increasingly allowing them to do what they are good at, what they are interested in, and there's a variety of things that they can choose from. So looking at the years the way they are being given, basically we are looking at a child learning foundational skills in primary or early childhood education. Then progressively they begin to pick up skills that they can adapt, and as they get to senior school they can pick careers. And we want to emphasize that we don't want to put children in a block. I know we have a lot of emphasis on science at the moment, but not all of us can be scientists. And really education is not just about science. Right. Education allows us to do the arts, the sciences as well. And that's what we want to open up to the learners, including technical education. As Emmanuel says, probably, he says skills are to be gotten from middle level colleges. We disagree. Because if I'm looking for a skill in writing, writing begins at the early levels. I cannot get to the middle level college if I can't write. So we need to design what it is we expect our children to do. Basically, we want children who have the basic skills, reading, writing. They are able to pick up any other skills in the different subjects as they move on. We want children who can keep themselves clean, know how to take care of their garments. They know what is expected of them around them, whether they are in school or not in school, and that progressively moves on until they get into their careers. Why are we emphasizing that? Every career has got a way in which it is conducted. And we need these children to get that from the earliest level, so that even if I choose a career like sports, sports has regulations. If it is law, law has its regulations, isn't it? So that means the basis that we give those children allows them, in whichever form of career they pick, to continually, and it becomes a way of life for them, so that it is not something that they are getting to and they discover, oh, this is what I ought to have done. And the education system needs to provide that. That's why they come to school, so that we add value to what it is they want to do within the norms that the society expects.
So helping to dismantle this hierarchy of professions, if you will, we'd put engineering, medicine, and law on a pedestal, and anything else that was not usually was looked down upon. Let's talk about the educational philosophy in Kenya. Emmanuel said it used to be that we'd prepare people for the workforce, for the labor market, right? And it pained a lot of parents to know that for decades, your entire primary career, educational career, came down to one test. And you wondered, I worked so hard, something could have happened in between, and all of a sudden you don't perform well, maybe you're not a very good test taker, and that's it for you. And of course now with the new curriculum trying to do away with that, which a lot of parents feel is great, but beyond that, is there an educational philosophy here in Kenya? And if not, how do we begin to even craft one?
We had, when 844 came into being, we had education for self-reliance. It was meant to be a philosophy. So when you go through school, you are supposed to get out of school capable of being self-reliant, being able to do all the things Jackie has mentioned, and being able to even employ yourself after school. I don't know what the philosophy is now, because we are no longer pursuing education for self-reliance. So we need to think about the whole issue of, first of all, what does the country want out of education system? And what do we want? Why do we want to educate people? Why are we investing the billions we invest in education? what do we want when someone has gone through school and we say this person is educated? Who do we want to see? And based on that, then we can start to ask ourselves, how do we then develop a philosophy that guides everything that happens in the education sector, from the curriculum to the pedagogy to the expected employers and of these people, to form a particular framework that will deliver the person we want when this person has gone through education system. Today, some of the most chaotic individuals in this country are, in quotes, educated to some very high levels, and they're very chaotic. And I don't think we want that to be our model. So we need to have in mind a model of this educated person before we can craft a philosophy that then takes us to deliver that person, to ensure that the education system delivers this person. I feel that we need a conversation that is bigger than the curriculum reforms that are ongoing. Beyond the curriculum reforms, we need to come to this question that Vic is raising. For me, I don't think I have an answer now, because I think it is much bigger than I can handle on my own. But it is a very important question. And I don't know if, Jackie, you have thought about that.
Beyond your role at KICD, this is just you as a Kenyan, as a parent. What do you hope to see in terms of education here in Kenya? Where do you want it to go? Where do you see it going?
I think I look at education, and what I just want to see is a graduate of the system who is able to appreciate the environment in which they are, be able to utilize that environment for the benefit of themselves or to take care of themselves, and will not forget that they need to give back to that same environment, because that is how we continue nurturing that environment. And in that regard, I think we are making an effort as KICD. The vision that we have of a Kenyan, we have put it in 3 big words. We are talking of an engaged, an empowered, and an ethical Kenyan. Because we believe an engaged Kenyan is one who has a hindsight of the environment where they are and knows what's happening around them. An empowered person will then be able to tell themselves, this is the situation I am in. How do I adapt into this situation? And even if it's a job I'm looking for example, and I don't have an office job, what's the alternative I have because I've gone to school? And we are looking for an ethical Kenyan because we expect us to follow our rules and regulations. If we don't follow our rules and regulations, the society breaks. So in a nutshell, we are simply looking at a Kenyan who appreciates what the Kenyan Constitution says, and therefore is a Kenyan who is of good character and of good moral behavior. And we believe if you have that, then the environment in which you're operating would definitely be conducive for all of us if we are able to work towards that. But let me just come back to what Emmanuel was talking about in terms of our philosophy. And listening to him, then I think our philosophy changes the way the curriculum changes. If the 844 curriculum philosophy was education for self-reliance, if you look at our sessional paper number 1 of 2005, the philosophy that was guiding the reforms is that we wanted a stable and cohesive society which would provide a platform for us to be able to grow economically and therefore prosper the country. And looking at that, then we are saying it is not that then we discard the education for self-reliance. Basically, all education should help us to be self-reliant so that we are able to take care of ourselves and anybody else around us. But also looking at our society, we are saying that there are certain aspects that we also need to take into account. And so stability is critical. Correct. Cohesiveness is very critical. And that, you know, if you look at a philosophy as an idea or a way of life, then we still do have a philosophy. Okay. And even as we are looking at the reforms now, the current sessional paper which we are working on that will guide the next years after the 2005 is talking about transformation in education. And we are looking at transformation not just as a theoretical attribute, but transformation where we can see innovativeness, which is critical if you want to go into the industrial age. Right. You would not be talking about theory. we have to think of what are the steps we need to take to make sure we get there.
All right, really quickly, let's take a look at feedback before I get your final remarks, Emmanuel. Stephen Mineup on Twitter saying KICD has a big responsibility of protecting the learners and teachers from the crooks who infiltrate misleading content into the classroom. There should be public awareness on the right materials and also monitor circulation of the same. Ken Yugi saying the problem with Kenyans, we are too academic. We need to be more practical with our education system. One last one here, Kelvin Kaya saying, you will know we have challenges with our education when a business graduate cannot start his or her own business. When a graduate stays at home, when the parent is walking with their papers and CVs looking for jobs. Let's take a quick look at SMSs on our line coming through. This one here, from a teacher, we don't know where from, State of Education. This is so true. I am a teacher and these books are badly written, poor grammar and stuff that makes no sense, especially the comprehension stories. Okay, Dr. Ndirangu from Thika saying this, what is the philosophy of our education? That is a major challenge for Kenyan education. Last one here from Lucas Wafula from Thika as well. One of the reasons we have bad books is piracy. Parents should not buy pirated books as they have mistakes and are blamed on publishers. KICD does a good job. All right. Final remarks, very briefly, 30 seconds, because we need to be out. Emmanuel.
I want us to have a philosophy that recognizes the fact that most education should not happen in school. I don't understand why children take schoolwork home and call it homework. I don't understand. Children need to go to school, learn whatever they learn in school, leave whatever they learn in school and go home and continue learning what they need to learn outside of school, because there is a lot to learn outside of school, and which is important, which is lacking in our current setup, because children do schoolwork at home and do schoolwork at school, and that is a big failure.
Okay, Jacqueline, really quickly.
Yes, that is true. And I mean, I think then we are on the right track, because that is exactly what we are trying to say, that there must be an interface between school and home. For us, school will give the ideal and give the direction the child needs to go. Home gives the environment for practice. And the early years education curriculum that we've done is exactly doing that, because the children, as they go home, we are telling parents, don't expect that they have to carry a book home and have to do sit work. No. If we've learnt about sweeping in school, then I go home and I practice to sweep. And I can tell mom and dad I can be able to sweep. If I'm learning about animals in school, I don't have to carry my book home to go and look at a picture of an animal. I go home and I tell mom, today we learnt about animals and I need to look at the animals that are around us. So I think it's important that Kenyans realize that all of us are in this in terms of education, and we need all the support that we can get. We are agreeable that yes, we have a big burden, as you've said, to be able to set the pace for this, education in this country. We appreciate that we must be able to meet the aspirations of everybody. It's not an easy thing. Right. But I think we also want to call on Kenyans that we need to work together. As the teacher has said, we need to, if we find there is a challenge somewhere, let's bring it up, because then we all work on it and ensure that we are better. We as KICD, I think, and as the ministry, we've opened the doors to people to be able to guide us, and that's why we've gotten to where we are. Great. We actually have what we refer to as a national steering committee. It's chaired by our cabinet secretary. It brings on board different players. This is a first of its kind. Right. It's not a commission. This is just a group of people who are drawn from different walks of life to come and look at what we would do something, and we are able to discuss with them and ask, are we on track or are we not on track? Okay. And once they tell us we are on track, then we think that we are actually representing the Kenyans well.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel and Jacqueline, for your time. It's certainly a conversation that we need to keep up, not just in this studio, not just in our classrooms, but in our homes as well, making education practical again, and teaching our children in the school of life. As you had alluded to, Emmanuel. Thank you so much for watching. That does it for Citizen Weekend. Have a lovely night. I'll see you again tomorrow evening on Sunday Live with Jeff Koinange.